Hey there, interwebs, and welcome back to Russell's Guide to Monsters, where tonight, in recognition of Halloween, we'll be taking a look at some truly fearsome critters, specifically the fearsome critters of American folklore. Although this series usually focuses on legendary creatures from Old World mythology and the more recent fictional beasts they've since inspired, it is my belief that fearsome critters are their spiritual successors in the modern American sphere. These fanciful beasts originated in the tall tales of 19th century logging camps, particularly around the Great Lakes regions. In this environment, the principal forms of amusement were making up stories and hazing the new guy, two activities which were by no means mutually exclusive. One lumberjack might begin with a casual remark to test the credulity of a newcomer, and his buddy might jump in with his own anecdote of the critter in question, enhanced by a bit of colorful description furnished by personal experience. The two would then pass the proverbial ball back and forth with utter sincerity, pausing occasionally to allow others to jump in with a personal account or a simple corroborative nod. By the time they were finished, the newcomer wouldn't dream of challenging the creature's existence any more than he would question his own. Because lumberjacks were largely itinerant workers, traveling from camp to camp, their tales of the filly-loo and the hide-behind had the perfect means by which to spread across the continent, and spread they did, changing a little with each retelling. Due to this rich diversity, this video will not be an exhaustive list of all fearsome critters. As products of folklore and thus oral tradition, they have no official canon, which leads to plenty of gray area. Several critters, for example, might actually be one and the same, merely known by different names in different regions, or it might have undergone a sort of metafictional speciation, losing features or gaining new ones, along with a new name as its story is retold from person to person. Still, I believe that most fearsome critters can yet be broken down into various categories, so that's what I'll be doing today, and providing examples for each one as we go. Additionally, it should be noted that fearsome critters are generally considered to be different from cryptids, but there is enough overlap between the two categories that some legendary creatures are considered to be members of both groups, such as Bigfoot, the Jersey Devil, and jackalopes. Right, with that preamble out of the way, let's get started. Our first category of fearsome critters is those which are closest to reality. These critters likely originated from real animals, either based in earnest on misinterpretations of observed behaviors, or with these animals inspiring knowingly fictional counterparts. For example, wood storks have been observed flying inverted for brief spells, and this may have given rise to the filly-loo crane, said to fly upside down. The upland trout is a piscine critter alleged to nest in trees, but the climbing perch and mangrove killifish can both live out of the water for extended periods of time, often taking shelter amongst fallen branches, and they're real, despite their fanciful names. The filly-loo may be the same thing as the goofus bird, also known as the filmaloo or flue-fly bird, and which is said to fly backwards and build its nests upside down. Also likely related is the gilly-galoo bird, which lays square eggs so they don't roll away. When hard-boiled, they make for excellent dice. As ludicrous as that sounds, certain species of real-life cliff-nesting birds have evolved to lay teardrop-shaped eggs, as a more conical shape will roll in a tighter circle, and wombats produce cubical poop for a similar reason. A fearsome critter from the southwest called the joint snake is a serpent able to reassemble itself after being cut or voluntarily breaking into pieces, and if one of those pieces is taken away and replaced with the knife used to cut it, the snake will incorporate the knife into its body instead. This makes me wonder if one could take this to its logical extreme and create an oops, all knives snake of Theseus by repeating this trick ad infinitum. Regardless, tales of this critter were probably inspired by certain legless lizards, also known as glass snakes or joint snakes, which are able to regrow their tails if cut, broken, or bitten off by a predator. Similarly, the armadillo lizard and its tendency to chomp its own tail as a defense mechanism might have inspired tales of the hoop snake. Real snakes are also known on occasion to swallow their own tails after mistaking them for prey. In case it wasn't already obvious from the name, the hoop snake is a snake which noms its own tail to form a hoop, like the Ouroboros of classical mythology or the Japanese Tsuchinoko. In this form, it chases its prey, rolling after them like a wheel. I also like to imagine that this is how the serpent in the Garden of Eden got around before Yahweh cursed it to slither on its belly, for as the saying goes, Satan was not a fucking pogo stick. Incidentally, turning into a wheel and rolling away is also how the golden wheel spider, Carparachne aureoflava, gets downhill in a hurry, but I digress. The next category of fearsome critters, or crittergory, is those which were probably invented to explain the mysterious phenomena that loggers, trappers, and frontiersmen were likely to encounter in the course of their lives. The tree squeak, for example, was said to hide in trees and make strange noises. The aggro pelter, meanwhile, hurls twigs and branches at passers-by. I myself nearly fell victim to one when I went for a walk in my local woods on a windy day and nearly got hit by progressively larger branches, not once, not twice, but thrice. Patterns left on the surface of fallen snow sometimes resemble the trails of a snake, specifically the snow snake, which is a fearsome critter only active in the winter. Cumulative damage to the haft of a logger's axe could just as easily be the work of an axe-handle hound. This is a dog-like creature said to chew up the handles of unattended axes, and it reminds me of two monsters from Dungeons & Dragons. The first is the rust monster, which would as lay feed an axe's head, and the second is the axebeak, with which the hound shares its hatchet-faced morphology. The hide-behind, meanwhile, is a ravenous beast which devours loggers, neatly explaining the disappearance of any who didn't return to camp at night, when in actuality they might have fallen victim to any one of 1,000 natural occupational hazards. Its name comes from the claim that it is so swift it can always hide behind the nearest tree before being spotted, and if no trees are available, it hides behind the observer. In fact, there could be one of these man-eaters lurking behind you right now. The hide-behind's namesake alacrity means that physical descriptions of it are vague, if not completely non-existent, and that brings us to the next pseudo-category, those which are defined by their behavior rather than their appearance. This group includes the aforementioned hide-behind, as well as the hang-down and the squidgicum-squee. The latter is a critter so shy that if it senses anyone approaching, it takes a deep breath and swallows itself whole, while the former is a slow, foolish creature that hangs upside down from tree branches like a sloth or a bat. On the other hand, we also have fearsome critters whose appearance is defined beyond mere description, well known through trick photography or the work of cunning taxidermists. These include the fur-bearing trout, adapted for those cold northern winters, and the now iconic jackalope, although it is also possible that the jackalope was inspired by real-life rabbits suffering from the choke papillomavirus. The example seen here is a hodag, a creature from the swamps of Wisconsin with horns and spines and a taste for flesh. There are also fearsome critters who seem to exist exclusively in defiance of common sense. These unfortunate critters almost inevitably have some aspect of their physiology which I can only describe as nonsense, and this anatomical nonsense leads to them adopting some rather strange behaviors to deal with it. The Dungaven hooter, for example, has no mouth. Instead, this crocodilian critter uses its powerful tail to pulverize its victims, and then it inhales them as an aerosolized vapor through its two gaping nostrils. It's a ridiculous image, but it reminds me of the astomoi, or mouthless ones of classical mythology. These fur-covered men also lacked mouths and survived on the scents of aromatic fruits and flowers. The hoogag is a creature like a moose with stiff, unjointed legs which prevent it from lying down, and a massively oversized upper lip which prevents it from grazing. To cope, it leans against trees when it needs to rest and subsists on a steady diet of pine nuts. As ridiculous as the idea is, it's not even unique to American folklore. The legendary Aclis of Roman mythology was also an elk-like creature with a long upper lip and unbending hind legs which caused it to rest against trees. The epitome of nonsense biology amongst fearsome critters, however, is, in my opinion, the side-hill gouger. The legs on one side of this critter are shorter than those on the other as a physiological adaptation for life on steep hillsides. I have heard that one can be subdued by sneaking up on it from behind and calling its name. When it turns around to face you, the short legs are now on the downhill side, causing it to fall over. If one were to find itself caught on level ground somehow, it would be doomed to permanently walk in circles, although a pair of gougers are said to have migrated west from New England by leaning on one another like two drunken buddies stumbling home from the pub. An amphisbaenian gouger could presumably move both forward and backward with equal ease. In case you're wondering how realistic gouger physiology is, I will say that limb asymmetry is uncommon in nature, but not unheard of. Crustaceans, including fiddler crabs, hermit crabs, clawed lobsters, and pistol shrimp, all have imbalanced front claws. Additionally, hermit crabs also have asymmetrical bodies to better fit the snail shells in which they live, and for which their larger claw acts as a door. The real-life animals which I believe are most like the clockwise or counterclockwise traveling side-hill gougers, however, are the scale-eating fish of the species Parasotus microlepus, whose left or right-facing jaws are asymmetrically adapted for life on one specific side of whatever fish they're currently parasitizing. The final subcritigory takes unusual anatomy to its illogical extreme. The physiology of these critters isn't just unrealistic, it's downright inorganic. They seem to exist more as mechanical apparatus-based thought experiments than plausible creatures. What do I mean by all of this? Let's take the swamp auger as an example. This large waterfowl has a swiveling beak or proboscis like a corkscrew, which it uses to drill holes in the bottoms of wooden boats. Meanwhile, the snollygoster, not to be confused with the snallygaster, gets about using a ship's propeller on the end of its tail. The tripodero has telescopic legs, and certain versions of the wampus cat depicted as a panther or mountain lion with pantographic limbs. It reminds me that as a kid, I had this little plastic toy of an extending lion, Panthera leo, so I guess you could call it and the wampus cat panthergraphic. Awful puns aside, the Wampus Cat is a phantom-like pantographic panther, and so it calls to mind D&D's Displacer Beast, or Shadow Cat. As a matter of fact, I like the Wampus Cat so much that I made my own variant of it for D&D called the Whoop-Ass Cat, which is a relation of the Displacer Beast. Both creatures have 2 sets of forelimbs, and the Whoop-Ass Cat's alleged pantographic limbs are actually based on witnesses misinterpreting the tentacles. Additionally, the Whoop-Ass Cat isn't the only homebrew D&D monster I've made based on a fearsome critter. Another was inspired by one last critter I want to mention before wrapping this video up, the Squonk. In addition to being the unofficial cryptid of my home state, this weird little guy is probably the most pathetic thing you'll hear about all week. Its lumpy, ill-fitting hide is covered in warts and other blemishes, and that's just the half of it. Not only is the Squonk ugly, it's also self-conscious. It constantly cries about its appearance, avoiding puddles of water and other reflective surfaces, and only comes out at twilight and night to avoid being well illuminated. If one is captured, it literally bursts into tears, preferring to dissolve into nothingness than be seen as it really is. This is where we get the Squonk's facetious scientific name, Lacrimocorpus dissolvens, as well as the scientific term, squonk. A chemical squonk is a substance which is stable in solution, i.e. in the wild, but cannot be isolated or captured without catalyzing its own decomposition. Speaking of chemistry, the tears of squonks in my D&D campaign are used as an alchemical base in many potions, which led to them being hunted faster than they could reproduce, and the creation of a designated hunting season to protect the remaining population. Their mating season is in late autumn, when the fruit on the ground is fully fermented, because even another squonk would have to be completely plastered to find a squonk attractive, hence the term, drunk as a squonk. But again, I digress. As I mentioned at the beginning, these are not all of the fearsome critters out there, and with such a wide diversity to choose from, it's almost inevitable that some won't categorize well. But as with all of my Guide to Monsters installments, this is only intended to be a jumping-off point, so let it be the first step on your journey to knowledge, not the last. If you would like to learn more, I have linked Henry Tryon's fantastic guidebook, Fearsome Critters, in the description, which you can read for free through archive.org. And, to end on a personal note, my 5 favorite fearsome critters are, in no particular order, the hoop snake, the axe-handle hound, the wampus cat, the side-hill gouger, and of course the squonk, which by almost complete coincidence also each represent one of my fearsome crittergories. Let me know what your favorites are in the comments below, especially if it's one which I didn't mention. Thanks for watching, and have a happy Halloween!